Hey Barbara, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. We just had a little bit of conversation before this recording, and I am just so overwhelmed with the story that you shared. First of all, you told me that you suffered from postpartum depression.
Right.
Um, uh, can you share a little bit about what your symptoms were?
Well, I was very depressed, having trouble sleeping, um, and my mind it sort of went into a fog, and I couldn't sleep. And then um, after some time, I became suicidal because I thought I was just a burden to my family,
Yeah.
and they'd be better off without me. And I had this brand new baby who was perfect and a wonderful husband, a great job, a good home to live in, all those advantages. And yet I was desperately unhappy. Um, and and then when I finally, after I became suicidal, I was hospitalized in our local psychiatric hospital,
Yeah.
and they diagnosed postpartum depression. That's what I had.
Mm.
Um, so
And then you said then your dad also sort of told you that your mom
yeah,
went through
yeah,
it.
yeah. My dad said, Mom had that. And I said, what? Yes, my mother had went through postpartum depression on the birth of my youngest brother, Douglas.
Yeah.
And I was 6 years old at the time. And my mother actually spent a year and a half looking for some kind of help and went from doctor to doctor to doctor to doctor. This was in the early 1950s. And she finally found a doctor that prescribed Thorazine, which was the first psychiatric medication that had been developed. And within just a matter of days, it pulled her out of her um, funk that she was in. She
Mm.
was, you know, very desperately unhappy and crying every day and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even moved my family for a time back to her mother's home and stayed with her mother for a while to see if that would help, and it didn't help her. But the psychiatric med helped her. Uh, so she was so grateful and happy. But me being 6 years old, I did not know what was going on, and they didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
And and so I didn't find out until I went through that experience myself.
Yeah. And I think you also told me that because you shared your story, it helped your daughter, right?
Yes, I had my daughter when my daughter was um, she has two boys now, and she was pregnant and having the boys. She knew she knew that I had gone through postpartum depression, and she knew that sometimes there is a hereditary link. There certainly was in my case,
Yeah.
and and she got therapy for herself while she was still pregnant, so that she would be able to handle it if a
Yeah.
problem came up after the birth. And she did. In both cases, she had sort of a rough time for a few weeks,
Yeah.
but she was in right away in therapy, and she was able to handle it. And whereas went into suicidal depression and was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for 3 weeks, and whereas she was able to just with therapy on the outside handle it. So I'm glad that I was open with her, so that she could understand um, that she might need help too, and she was going to get help ahead of time. And I wasn't shy about letting her know that I was getting help, psychiatric help. So I think I'm glad I told her about that.
Yeah, no, Barbara, this is so important that you're talking about it.
Yeah,
And I'm hoping that, your story about being open about postpartum depression, this is such a big taboo topic. People don't want to talk about it. They want to, like, they almost feel bad that, they have
yeah,
a baby, right? And
yeah.
little,
They have this beautiful child, and then why am I so desperately unhappy?
yeah,
And
unexplainable.
your hormones are going like this, and then you haven't have a genetic predisposition like me, then you're just set up for something like that, you know.
Yeah. So
Um,
talking about it is going to help your daughter, and I'm hoping that, once people listen to your story, they won't feel like, they are suffering, right? This is like,
yeah,
it's real, like you said.
it happens, and it's real, and even in the best of circumstances, which I think I had. I mean, I had a beautiful child, um, a wonderful husband, a great job, you know, supportive family, all of those things that you need, you
Yeah,
know, but uh, still, I had, you know, very severe depression, and and not a circumstance that I would wish on anybody, you know, but it does happen, you
yeah,
know, and it is possible to get help. I mean, I got help and I got better, you know, so it's possible to get help.
yeah. Thank you, Barbara. I appreciate your sharing your story.
Yeah,
Thank you for opening up and talking about it.
happy to do so. And then what um, my experience actually in with postpartum depression is something that eventually led me. Um, you know, I started a depression support group at church after I had shared my story at church, and there were so many women that came up to me. I was just said, "Me too, me too, me too." Yeah,
Yeah,
not all of them were postpartum, but a lot of them were just depression
yeah,
of various kinds. And so I started a depression support group, and then I realized how important it was to be open about a story. You know, and being able to tell it, you know, and even though, I was telling you earlier that the first time that I wanted to tell my story, you know, I'd set up something to situation for me to tell my story, and then at the last minute I chickened out because I just can't do this, you know, I'm
it's very hard.
panicky. Yeah, and so I just, you know, sort of put it on the shelf, and then several years later, I was able to just go back to it with no problem at all, you know. So you just sometimes you just have to be ready, you know,
Yeah.
to
And also, I think
do it.
once you've spoken it once, it becomes really easier.
Yeah, and especially when you see that other people are being helped because of
Exactly.
that, you know, and and that you know, sort of changed my whole outlook on what was important for me to be doing in the world, you know. So now I'm not shy at all about telling people what
Yeah,
I've been through. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, and you've not even fearing judging, right, from people because really you're making a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you again, Barbara. Appreciate your time with us today.
Okay.